This is probably the biggest investor conference in Brazil. And I think we're going to close it at the highest note with you. For those of you here in the audience and watching us, Dara was actually born in Tehran. His family fled Iran during the revolution, establishing itself in the US. He graduated in engineering from Brown University. Then, not everyone's perfect. He started his life as an investment banker in Allen & Company, then moved to USA Networks, then became the CEO of Expedia, joining then Uber in 2017 as CEO, taking over for one of the founders. He led the IPO of Uber in 2019. After that, he had to face the pandemic, which I imagine must not have been easy. But very successful transformation in Uber to profitability. Just recently reached its peak valuation in November, if I'm not mistaken. And as of February, Bill Ackman from Pershing Square, who is also a friend of the house, stated that Pershing Square had accumulated over a $2 billion position in Uber, saying it was one of the best run businesses in the world. So congratulations, Dara. Quite an impressive accomplishment so far. But we want here to talk with you about management, technology, and challenges. And
Thank you very much for having me.
I cannot be different than to start asking you about the Uber transition. How was it leading a company which was led by a founder? It was a time of growth at all costs, and you made it profitable. What were the key strategic decisions that you took, and how have you been able to manage profitability with continued investments to continue to grow?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, thank you for having me. From the good news as it related to my coming over to Uber is that while the company when I joined was going through many cultural challenges, was going through a brand challenge, the brand was not viewed favorably at the time. The good news is from a product standpoint, in terms of a product that consumers loved, a product that many couldn't live without, it was in great shape. The company always had a very, very consumer-centric viewpoint. As we build product, we don't just build product for, call it utility, but we also build it for consumer love. We want to build products that are incredibly easy to use, that make your life a little bit easier. And that was always something that we had, in that we had a product that we loved. And for me, the challenge was coming in, changing the culture of the company a bit to grow, call it the right way, and move from grow at all costs to grow in concert kind of with society, thinking about regulators, thinking about our driver pool, and then obviously bringing the financial discipline to the company to grow in a capital efficient way. I do think that the company, to some extent, was a creature of its time. I'm sure you're very familiar with it, but when I joined and during the period when the company was founded, the cost of capital was next to zero. And revenue 10 years from now was valued basically as valuably as revenue a year from now. The discount was very, very low. So it made sense for the company to actually chase growth, because that was certainly what the market was rewarding, so to speak. And the other factor for us was our talent base, our engineers, who really are the heroes of the company. I get to talk about all the good stuff, but the engineers are the builders. They tended to move to the products that were growth oriented. If you had a payments product that could increase efficiency and earn you $100 million a year, that wasn't very interesting for the engineers, because the heroes were the ones who were driving top line. So we needed a cultural change, but we also needed help from the markets as well. And as you saw the market shift from growth at all costs to much more disciplined growth, there's a Warren Buffett saying that, when the water goes out, you kind of see you can tell the difference between the good and the bad. I do think that the environment changing really helped. And then for me, the challenge was really building a culture where the heroes were, the people who are building for growth. But also, if you save $50 million, $100 million, it was really teaching the company that you could take those savings and reinvest them for growth, or you could also take them to the bottom line as well. It took a while. It definitely took the public markets, et cetera, changing as well. We were fortunately ahead of the game. And about 3-4 years ago, we said, no more headcount growth. The company's going to grow top line at 20%, but we're going to keep headcount flat. Necessity is the mother of invention, and we have kept headcount essentially flat. We've, probably now we're close to tripling, certainly a little more than double the gross bookings of the company, and headcount has grown by 10 to 15% only. So the efficiency of the machine is now starting to show. I think, frankly, we had room. So I don't want to say that I'm here, we were heroes, because I think the company was too fat, so to speak, previously. And as we got leaner, now you have a culture which is, hey, growth is incredible. We want to keep growing the company, as close to 20% as possible in terms of the top line. But we want the significant portion of that growth to show up in the bottom line, which is, the magic that happens when you're significantly profitable. So far, so good. But the market shift helped a lot. I needed the market to shift. And then finally, my team will listen to me, because sometimes they just don't listen to the boss. At least in the States, they don't.
Now, I can relate to what you're saying. I mean, first of all, for us being a bank which digitalized itself but had to deliver profitability, competing with people that had basically zero cost of capital was extremely hard. And similar to what you guys did, we also put a ceiling on the headcount of our technology team, and we're benefiting tremendously from operational leverage. I think the same way you are. But I have something that
and I would tell you that an abundance of capital, even though it shouldn't, does hurt operating discipline. It's the benefits that you get from operating discipline. Again, like if you introduce an AI model that's better able to predict fraud, it's something that I'm sure you're very familiar with. It takes a huge amount of work, takes 6 months of work. You introduce it, your fraud capture rates may improve by a couple of basis points, and it may be, call it 10 million, 20 million to the bottom line. And in a world of capital abundance, no one cared. So the reward that you got from the really, really hard operational work just wasn't there. It was instantly overwhelmed by capital coming into the markets. So I do think that as we see interest rates increase, as we see the cost of capital increase, I personally think that it is going to show up in productivity in the economies of the world. It's definitely, when I talk to other tech companies, other CEOs, there's no question that the productivity of the private markets is improving. Hopefully with, government spend, et cetera, if we have some discipline there as well, we'll see the productivity of public spend improving as well. But I do think there's a productivity tailwind that's coming as the cost of capital has gone up that I think is going to benefit many, many industries.
Completely agree. And talking about Uber, you have been also diversifying the business, finding new avenues of growth. Can we talk about, let's say, recent performance milestones in global rideshare and delivery markets, which you're seeing, which markets and segments you are considering most relevant for the future, and how Uber is working to position itself against the regional rivals, right? Rivals. For example, in Brazil, we know you have a different competitor than other places. How are you working on that? How are you seeing that work?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think from a growth standpoint, I mean, growth is the thing that keeps us excited here. It's part of our DNA. And from our standpoint, we want to build the world's preeminent local real-time logistics company. And that logistics serves, getting people to places and then essentially getting things to places, anything. We started in the ride segment, moving people. We took that same skill set, built up our Uber Eats business. Unfortunately, we're not in Brazil because a certain company like iFood was a pretty tough competitor. So we pulled out. But our Eats business now is as large, essentially, as our mobility business. And then within Eats, whereas we started within the category of food, now we want to deliver anything into your home. So we've gone into grocery, alcohol delivery, pharmacy, pet food, basically any local retail shop we want to be delivering for on a same-day basis. To some extent, we think we can help retailers, that local retailer, out Amazon. Amazon will get you there, get you what you need next day. The local retailer can get you what you need the next hour. And we're also now building a business of delivery as a service. So previously, with Uber Eats, a restaurant or grocery store would show up on the Uber Eats map app, and you'd order through that app. But if, for example, you order an iPhone on Apple in the US, you can get that iPhone delivered same day to you from an Apple store. That's actually an Uber Eats courier that's going and picking up that phone and delivering to your home as well. So delivery as a service, again, extending logistics, same day logistics to empower every single local retailer, not just the big players like Apple, is a huge part of our service. So if you look at continued growth in mobility, autonomous is going to be a huge growth driver there. We'll talk about that. Then with delivery, expanding the scope of what you can get delivered to at home, and then an extension, which is actually building out a logistics service, a real-time logistics service for every single merchant out there. Those are, I would say, our largest growth vectors for us. So we're very, very excited about the future there. In terms of growth around the world, it's actually fairly consistent, which is we're growing at very healthy rates everywhere. I tell you that we don't feel weakness in Europe. I'd say, there have been a lot of discussions about Europe and growth in Europe and whether it's lacking or not. The European markets are incredibly healthy for us. The US market, obviously, is a terrific market for us. Asia remains a big category. And then Latin America, and especially Brazil, is a huge, huge market for us. That was actually one of my biggest surprises when I came from Expedia to Uber. Expedia also had a global business as well, but Uber's penetration in Latin America and Brazil is very, very high, and I'm happy to talk about it at some point. But for example, 6 of our top 10 cities in terms of mobility trips are in Brazil. So Brazil is just an incredible market for us, incredible growth area for us. And then in terms of the competitive environment, as you know, these are trillion-dollar marketplaces, both in terms of mobility. They're trillion-dollar marketplaces in terms of delivery. We have a ton of competition, both globally and locally. And, with the local players, we obviously, the advantage that we have is we are a global brand. People who travel especially tend to use Uber because we're available in most of the countries, certainly in the Western world. So we tend to do very well there. And then we have a very large engineering team. We've got about 8,000 engineers now who can build products that essentially work all over the world. That is our strength. And over a long period of time, I just think we can innovate faster at larger scale than local competitors. Now, I would tell you that the local competition is tough. And so local competitors can be a bit more nimble because they can fine tune their product for the particular country or the particular region that they're operating in, versus us, which is our strength is, our scale, but it also means that when we build a product, we have to build for the average, to some extent. It's hard for us to customize country by country by country. And delivery is a local mobility and delivery they're fundamentally local, not just from a country to country basis, but from a city to city basis. So our being a global company, but building such a local product is a challenge for us. It's something that we're getting better at. But when I think about prioritization, we plan on every half of the year, we kind of all get together. What are we going to prioritize? What are we going to build? There are feature sets that the team in Brazil might want, or India might want, that don't hit kind of that global cutoff line. And that's always, for me as a global CEO, a real challenge, because that's where some of my local players can beat us to the punch. Over a long period of time, we can move faster because we just have incredible talent and a lot of talent working on products. But I think local competition will always be challenging, and it keeps us young, it keeps us hungry, and once in a while getting your butt kicked like we did in Brazil keeps you humble, food. And I think global companies, you need to stay humble, you need to push, and we don't take our success for granted for a second.
I have to say that when I was doing my research and I found out that I think you have over 7 million people globally that work for you as independent contractors, and for you to be able to guarantee the quality of service, which has, let's say, the Uber stamp all around the world, I imagine it must be really, really hard, right? Because one thing is to get the app, get the car, but then you have to make sure that you get the good drivers that continue, the bad drivers that exit, and I can't even imagine what a challenge that might be. But
It's both a challenge and opportunity of technology at scale, and I'm sure at some point we'll talk about AI. Most of the machinery at Uber, the pricing, the routing, which courier you're matched up with, which restaurant you're matched up with, et cetera, all of these are driven by AI algorithms that can learn on a global basis, but then can customize on a local basis as well. And then we do have local teams who are very much empowered. They are the ones running the business. They own the P&Ls to make sure that the global technologies that we're building actually operate on a local basis as designed. Because when something goes wrong, to your point, when something goes wrong at Uber, if you order dinner from your family and it's delayed by 45 minutes, there's a real consequence to that. So the weight of how necessary a service we're building is something that we take very seriously, and we put a lot of care into building the technologies that are able to work on the ground.
no, and not only that, right? But the image risk is huge. If you you order a car and it's a top black car and it's not at par, it goes on the news, right? So it can be a problem.
And I'll tell you, Roberto, like one of my memories that still is like in the back of my brain, I'll never forget, was a year and a half into being at Uber. Our systems were a little bit brittle. Our payment systems for our drivers stopped working for 2 hours. And a driver called me, and I picked up the phone, and he's like, "I didn't get paid for my work today, and I can't buy dinner for my family." Like that's just if and when now. That hasn't happened since, because you can imagine my reaction with the team to fix it. We operate in the real world, and so the weight of that and the responsibility there is much, much greater.
Yeah, and it's impossible not to talk to you about Uber and Brazil. And I'm not sure if you are aware of how much of a transformation in society the fact that you're empowering these micro entrepreneurs to get a living out of working with you or for you. They have the privilege of choosing what is the best time for them, how many hours they want to work. Nobody's telling them what they have to do. So it's a complete different scenario than, 30 years ago. You would get a job. People would tell you when to come in, when to leave, what to do, what to get paid. You could not work more because the union didn't let you or the laws don't let you. And at least in Brazil, we see this. Today, we had some political panels here and yesterday at our conference, and you would see that the word entrepreneur became very, very common in all of the speeches. And this, I think, is in big part because of what you're doing. People have to make a capex. They either buy a motorcycle, buy a car, or they rent one.
Yes.
And then they go and work. This is truly, truly transformational if you think about it from a cultural point of view. But at the same time, Brazil still has its challenges in regulatory and sometimes outdated laws. And every once in a while, you guys have these issues coming up. And as you said, 6 of the 10 largest cities by volume are in Brazil. Not that I think we should be really proud of that, because I think that says a lot about our public transportation infrastructure. But what are your plans for Brazil? What are the trends, the outlook you're seeing for Brazil? How do you deal with these regulatory and labor laws challenges? How is Brazil treating you, and what are you thinking about Brazil?
Yeah, so we care deeply about Brazil. Again, from a trip standpoint, Brazil is our single largest country on a global basis, which is pretty amazing. We have, I think it's our largest country in terms of the number of drivers and couriers who are on our platform.
Do you know how many by any chance?
About 1.4 million.
Wow.
So and growing very, very quickly. So it's a big population who's earning on our platform. I think in the past 10 years, that population has made about $25 billion in earnings on our platform. And usually when I visit markets, I like to meet with drivers and couriers. And you said it, which is that the entrepreneurialism of these drivers and couriers in terms of how they think about their particular business, what hours they work, where they work, and their strategies as far as customers, et cetera, it's extraordinary. Like, they know our systems better than I know our systems. I always meet with them because then I learn a lot about the good stuff and the issues as well. And then afterwards, I meet with our engineering team to, seem way more knowledgeable than I am about the particular markets. But they really understand our systems. They're very, very engaged with the platform. They take a great deal of pride in the work that they do. And they also understand that with the system, which is they do have freedom to choose when and where they want to work, which is quite empowering. At the same time, they need strategies that match the market demand, right? So a driver who may want to drive at 1 p.m. when the demand for mobility is not that much in a certain neighborhood just isn't going to make that much money. So they each kind of pick and choose exactly what their strategies are in order to maximize their earnings and maximize their earnings during the periods of time in which they want to work. So Brazil for us has worked out really well. One of the newer initiatives for us in Brazil is, because it's such a big market, I wanted to get actually engineers on the ground in Brazil. It was just, and what we're finding is the talent base, a lot of financial services firms, et cetera, in terms of engineering talent is actually quite rich. So one of our biggest growth areas in Brazil is actually going to be getting engineering talent on the ground. They're a little bit cheaper than engineers in San Francisco. They're very, very hungry to prove themselves for global companies. As you can imagine, we're a big brand here. So our engineering footprint is going to grow in Brazil pretty significantly. And then I would tell you, in terms of the relationships with the government, I think the good news is that because of our scale there and because we're so local, I think we always get a fair shot to have a dialogue with regulators, both at the national level and on the state level, on the local level as well. And, I think we're a very important, vital service for Brazil, obviously. Brazil is an incredibly important country for us. And I think as long as we get to have that dialogue, then I think we can keep heading in the right direction, which is Uber growing, but also earnings for our earner base and our earner base generally growing as well, because it's one of the top ways in which people come into kind of the earning economy and get a bank account, get paid, and move out of the cash economy as well. That's also, we think, a feature that we're very proud of, that we think we can keep pushing from a societal standpoint.
Does Brazil go above this 20% or on trend?
About the same.
About the same?
Brazil growth has been very, very strong. It's interesting, actually. One of our goals across the world is to create a more affordable service generally as it relates to mobility. Mobility historically has been, it's a service where more wealthy people can pay for an Uber, they get their time back, they can work in their car, et cetera. And we've been driving affordability as a category. One of the categories that's growing fastest now around the world is actually moto two-wheelers and two-wheeler transportation. Obviously, the vehicles are a lot less expensive, so more earners can earn. It's also a cheaper way of getting around. I have not yet experienced it, but I'm very much looking forward next time I'm in Brazil to take a two-wheeler. I think my team would panic a little bit.
I don't think really you should.
Fast.
I think the risk return isn't there.
I'll wear armor plates just to make sure that it's good. But that's actually one of our fastest growing products globally, and Brazil is one of the leads there. And obviously, safety is a big concern and something that we're really, really working on.
Yeah, I think I told you this when we met personally, but I'm going to take a moment here just to say that I'm so happy to hear that you're bringing Uber engineering to Brazil and that you recognize the talent. As I told you, just recently we did basically a give back project to Brazil, which is a not-for-profit tech university whose goal is to be Brazil's MIT. And actually, I'm so glad that Uber recruited there. They were so happy with the talent they recruited at Intelli, which is this university, that they created the Intelli-specific spots. That if no students from Intelli want the job, then they open up to other universities. But if not, they will do. And one of my scholarship students actually is employed by Uber, and she is making now, I think it's 3.5 times her family income before she went to university. Wow. So it's really amazing. Transformational. So
I'm glad we're teaming up like this. It's really cool.
So moving back to the global scenario, we talked about growth vectors, but we have to talk about AI. And I'm very surprised that whenever I get an Uber, I mean, maybe I've had 1 or 2 bad experiences in the last years, but it's very rare. So you guys must have very powerful algorithms, very powerful AI. And how is AI impacting Uber in general, and your general views of the role of AI in mobility? And after that, I'll ask the next question. Let's start with AI, because I think this is so
Absolutely.
relevant.
So, I think AI has really captured the imagination of the world generally, the business community as well. But it's important to recognize that AI technology has been around for a very, very long time. It's just developing in a different vector. AI algos have been around for the past 10, 20 years. They moved from relatively simple models to progressively more complex models, deep learning models, et cetera. And now you're getting these truly larger models, the LLMs that I think consumers are quite familiar with. But much of our core technology for the past 10 years has been essentially driven by AI. And, the price you get on Uber, the driver you're matched with, the route that you take, all of this is driven by AI. Customer service interactions, all driven by AI algorithms. Now, these algorithms are relatively more simple, but without them, there's no way we could scale the way that we do, and there's no way we could scale with the kinds of quality that we do as well. That's kind of basic work that we have been at for 10, 15 years as part of our core culture. We have a bunch of folks from Google and Facebook, et cetera, who have built these algos for a living. And the marketplace skill set for us, how to match a rider with a driver, how to match an eater with a restaurant, with a courier on a real-time basis, is driven by all of these algorithms. And we're pretty rare for a retailer, which is most retailers, when they sell you a product, they know what their inventory is. They actually know what they have before they sell it to you. When we sell you a ride, or we sell you, let's say, groceries, we actually don't know what drivers or couriers are available to deliver you. So we have to kind of predict The good, whether or not we have availability, price it out on a real-time basis, we then sell it to you, and then we go and procure it on a real-time basis. We're making probably 20 million predictions, AI-driven predictions, as to what we think the market's going to be every single second to get you kind of the product that you really, really take for granted. It's a pretty simple product on the surface. Now, what's changing is these larger models that are able to do much more than price, match, route, et cetera. And that is an extraordinary opportunity, I think, for every single business out there. This AI is able to do much broader tasks, is able to do much more human-driven tasks, and make humans much more productive. So we're applying AI now to, for example, our developers who can become super developers, can get assistance from AI agents to develop. We think that's going to be a huge future for us. Customer service now is very rules-driven. It's essentially, Roberto called. Is he a good customer? Is he not a good customer? What happened? What's our policy? What's the response? Very simple, I would say, heuristic-style interactions. We can now have AI models power those interactions. And at first, we're using AI models to help our agents become better agents. Eventually, we'll be able to have the models actually take, the full interaction. So we are for a technology that is already having such impact in society and in products. It's pretty extraordinary how immature this technology is, the AI technology is. And I think the changes that you're going to see over the next 5 years are going to be very, very significant and are going to give companies like ours that are, I'd say, tech first, a huge boost. And I think it's very, very important for traditional companies to really do the work and the diligence as to how they can use AI to empower their employees and empower themselves. Because if they don't, then there will be a tech upstart who is going to build an AI-first enterprise, call it, which is going to give more traditional companies a real challenge.
So, unfortunately, we're approaching the last 10 minutes we had on your schedule. If not, we could spend the whole day here. And it's impossible not to. We talked about the social impact on Uber in society, and how important we see it in Brazil. And it's impossible not to talk about autonomous vehicles. Because if you go to San Francisco,
yes, of course,
it's a reality. And of course, you have to be on top of that, because if not, you have a chance of being disrupted. So what is the long-term vision that you have for incorporating autonomous technology into the platform? And what is the timeline that you expect we're going to have this will actually be meaningful in Uber's network?
So I think there's a history in terms of any predictions made in terms of autonomous timelines have been ridiculously wrong, including from me and all the experts in the world. So it has just been a very unpredictable technology as far as its development. I would tell you that the technology is ready. It is working today. If you look, like you said, in the streets of San Francisco, there are Waymos all over the place. They are driving the streets. They are giving people rides live. I'd encourage anyone who goes to SF to try it out. It is a delightful product. The Waymo driver is a terrific driver. It's happening in the streets of China today as well. So the technology is absolutely there as it relates to autonomous. Now, the commercialization and scaling the technology is not there. The economics are not there, just being frank, in that the cost of the cars is in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. And today, an AI, an autonomous vehicle costs more than a human because, again, we're talking about very low unit sizes in terms of its development. That is going to take time. But if there's one constant that we've had in technology is that hardware cost and technology costs over a long period of time come down as you scale. There is a Gen 2 of autonomous vehicles coming. They're going to come in the next 3 to 4 years because it takes time to scale up manufacturing. Those vehicles will be comparable to human cost. They're not going to be much cheaper than human cost. And there's a Gen 3 that's going to hit probably 6 to 7 years from now, which will be much more efficient than humans. So I do think that as it relates to the commercialization and the scaling of autonomous vehicles, it is going to take time. That time is going to be limited more by hardware and the ability to manufacture, these cars at scale versus software, because the software is getting there rapidly. I think the other question to ask as it relates to society, to me, there are lots of questions, but there are two big ones. One is safety. There are more than 1 million vehicle fatalities every single year all around the world. And the fact is, we all know humans are fallible, and society accepts humans making mistakes. There are consequences to those mistakes, but we accept it quite readily. If you fast forward 20 years from now to a world where robot drivers are 10 times better than human drivers, you would still have robots responsible for 100,000 fatalities every single year. 1 million going down to 100,000. Now, that is wonderful for society in terms of our streets getting safer, but I don't think that's acceptable for society, right? Because people expect technology to be perfect. So I think one of the big questions and we want to have these discussions with regulators is, we have an opportunity to set the standard for autonomous of superhuman safety. I don't think we should accept autonomous drivers that are better than humans. They should be multiple times better than humans. And if we set that standard, technically we'll get there, but we need to set that standard. That is a very important discussion for us to have regulators. What's the definition of superhuman? 5 times better, 10 times better, 15 times better, 20 times better. But there's no doubt in my mind that autonomous driving will be safer. The question is, how much safer must it be? And then the second question, of course, is job displacement. It will take a long period of time. I do think that the dramatic statement, which is autonomous is going to take a lot of jobs, et cetera, is always in the press. The fact is that, at least in the US, unemployment rates are all-time lows, and we're more technology-driven society than we ever have been. So historically, societies are all able to make adjustments. As you have automation, people get to move up into more value-added categories, and we certainly are going to support that happening with our earners.
From your experience, do you think that the Gen 1 or Gen 2 technology would work in the streets of São Paulo, or is it too chaotic?
São Paulo is pretty chaotic. Now, there's no question to me that it'll work. But if you look at the cost of the vehicles in terms of cost per mile, the first markets that you're going to see penetration are going to be more the US markets, European markets, where the cost per mile is much higher than Brazil. So I think it's going to take the Gen 3 vehicles to navigate the Brazilian streets, not because they can't, but because the economics aren't going to be there for a while.
Yeah, and I think by then, the first two issues that you mentioned, which is what is the acceptable standard and what are the consequences socially, will probably have experiences and have some knowledge to by the time it gets to Brazil. And last, I just want to touch on electrification on the last few minutes we have. Are you seeing this happening in the fleet? Do you have a view of what's going to happen to Brazil and Latam? Do you have any partnerships with automakers and infrastructure charging providers? What's your view on the electrification of automobiles?
Yeah, absolutely. So our view is we believe in a future mobility that is electrified, that's shared, more than one person sharing a vehicle, and then ultimately autonomous. So electrification is a very, very big factor for us going forward. I do think that it's important to recognize that we've had a goal to be all electric by 2030 in the US, Europe, and then 2040 all over the world. I do think that electrification, based on the US and certain other areas, it has taken a step back. And Whereas I would say the momentum that we had and many others had in terms of EVs and bringing affordable EVs into society, that has slowed down, and it's certainly slowed down in the US. Now, it remains an incredibly important strategy for us, and the average Uber driver is moving to electric at 5 times the speed that the average driver is. So the penetration is happening, and the average driver is driving 5 times the miles and kilometers of the average driver. So the next driver that you want to move to electric to help the environment is actually the Uber driver, because they have a lot of miles on their cars. A lot of times we keep score based on the number of vehicles sold. We should keep score based on the number of miles driven. And in most of the world now, we're at about 10% of miles driven, EVs. In Europe, it's closer to 15%, and in certain cities, it can be over 20%, for example, London as well. So we have a long way to go. And to me, there are a couple of things that have to happen. We need more affordable EVs. It is not happening in the US fast enough in certain areas, especially with Chinese EV manufacturers. It is happening. Those are excellent, high quality, affordable vehicles. Second is we need the charging infrastructure in place. That's probably the biggest challenge in Latin America, for example. The charging infrastructure in Sao Paulo or many other cities are not quite there, so that our drivers have the ease of mind of being able to charge when and where they need to. And the third is we need financing for our earners. So much of our switch over to electric vehicles is happening through fleets that have access to financing, whereas it's harder for the individual driver to be able to finance this EV vehicle and take the risk on the EV vehicle. And once those three things come together, affordability, charging, and financing, I think we can really move this forward. But we're not there yet, certainly in Latin America. And we're investing very aggressively through partnerships and just putting money on the line to get there.
I have to say that the day I call an Uber and I get an autonomous electric vehicle, I will have felt that I've joined the Jetsons, right? It was something I grew
awesome.
up, but it's amazing. But Dara, thank you so much. This was very enlightening. Congratulations on what you have done. And as I told you, I think you underestimate the impact you have on Brazilian society and the growth of this entrepreneurial culture, which is a culture of work, ethics, transformation, which we fully support and approve. And congratulations on what you've done. And thank you very much for being with us. Ciao.
Thank you for having me. Really enjoyed the conversation.